Will, let's turn to the Commission on Institutional History and Community. Would you remind us of the charge you gave to that group?
Sure. The charge was simple. I asked the group to think about whether there are ways that we could teach and present our history any better than we currently do. And my focus was and is squarely on the educational mission, and asked the question in the spirit of non incautus futuri, just like the strategic plan. How can we get better at one of the important things that we do? Commission worked hard responding to that charge all of last year, delivered a report to me in May, which I then shared with the entire W&L extended community. I invited all members of the W&L community to share their reactions with me. Many did. And last summer I got about 400 letters and emails, most of them long and thoughtful and
Now, did you
and
really
passionate.
read every one of them?
I read every
You
single
did?
one,
Yeah.
yes. And that's how I spent my summer. I spent my summer reflecting on the commission report, reflecting on all the feedback that I received. I issued my own thoughts at the end of August, and then the board had the opportunity to talk in person at the October meeting, after which it announced its own decisions in relation to the report.
Okay. We'll come back to those. I want to ask you briefly about the future museum of the university. What do you foresee happening in that new special space?
Yeah, I am excited about the museum. I think it is one of the most important responses to that question: how can we do a better job of teaching and presenting our history? That's what the museum is for. I mean, museum is not just a place for objects, although it is that. But it's really an educational center. It's a place where we have the facilities, and we can display our objects, and we can tell the very many important and fascinating stories of this place. So that museum is, to my mind, a terrific opportunity.
Seems like an unusual step to take if one was interested in either hiding or erasing any history. Do I have that right?
I think you're right. I'm interested in more history, not less. One of the personal pleasures for me of having the great opportunity to take this job has been learning so much more than I knew about the history of this country and the history of this great school. And it's a lot of fun, and I want to share as much of it as possible with everybody who's interested.
You're also searching for a new position called, I think, the Director of Institutional History. Talk a little bit about your hopes for that.
Yeah, the idea there is to have somebody whose job it is to get out of bed every day and lead our efforts to understand and teach and present our history. So that job will involve, importantly, launching our new museum, and then hiring the staff and thinking through the programming that we will offer in that educational center. It will also involve thinking about how that new museum relates to Lee Chapel and to the Reeves Center and to special collections, many other places that we have on campus where we tell our stories. And it will involve advancing some of the educational projects that I think were great ideas in the commission report. So doing oral histories of the first African American students at W&L, doing oral histories of some of the first women at W&L, doing a digital campus history tour so that people can walk the campus with their own iPhone or their iPad and really learn a lot about what they're seeing all around them. So it's really a position intended to intelligently coordinate the many dimensions of the work related to educating people about our history and giving that work the prominence that it deserves.
Talk, if you will, about the board's decision to rename both Robinson Hall and the Lee Jackson House.
Yeah, I think if I think about the response to the commission report and the things that we're doing, it's really three basic things. One is creating the new museum to teach our history. Another is making sure that we continue to remember and recognize and honor Washington and Lee and some of the other giants who made this place what it is, but also make sure that we recognize and honor some W&L pioneers who deserve to be better known than they are. And in this case, those involve John Chavis, thought to be the first African American to complete a college education in the United States, and he did it right here. That's an extraordinary thing. And Pam Simpson, who was the first female tenured faculty member at W&L, and also the first woman to hold the position of Associate Dean of the college. So renaming those buildings is primarily seizing the opportunity to recognize some true W&L pioneers in Chavis and Simpson.
What has and has not changed about and in Lee Chapel?
Well, I think the most important thing that hasn't changed is that we're continuing to use it as an active space for distinguished university events. Last week, I participated as a reader in the traditional service of lessons and carols with the university singers, which is a special opportunity. Next month, we will host Founders Day in Lee Chapel. I will speak at that event, but the distinguished speaker at that event will be Christy Coleman of the American Civil War Museum in Richmond. She's the CEO, and we'll be very excited to have her speak there. So we're continuing to use the space as it was intended to be used. In order to do that, we're making sure that it is not confused for a Confederate memorial. So the changes that have been made in there with respect to the portraits that we display and the times that the very prominent sculpture of Lee at rest on the battlefield in his Confederate uniform, when that sculpture is really visible and central to the experience. We're making those changes so that when we have university events in the space, the focus can be on those university events.
Okay. What will happen to the former portraits of Lee on the right and Washington on the left as you sit in the chapel?
Yeah, I guess I should say what we have done is for many years, since I believe 1963, the same two portraits have hung in the chapel. And the one of Lee, which as you're facing the portraits was to your right, was painted by Pine in the early 1900s, so more than 30 years after Lee's death. He painted that from a photograph of Lee in his Confederate uniform. The portrait of Washington was done in 1772 by Peale, and it's the only, I believe it's the only pre-Revolutionary War portrait of Washington. It was commissioned by Martha Washington. It depicts him in his uniform as a colonel in the Virginia militia. Extraordinary painting, thought to be the greatest portrait of Washington. We're very proud to own it. We have now placed a portrait of Lee in the chapel that was painted in 1866 when he was, in fact, the president of Washington College, and it shows him as he was.
Our Lee, you might say.
Yeah. It shows him as the president of the college, and he looks fantastic doing the job. And the portrait of Washington, we've entered into, I think, a really exciting arrangement with Mount Vernon. So we have loaned them our Peale portrait, which was actually painted at Mount Vernon. It was commissioned by Martha Washington, painted at Mount Vernon, hung at Mount Vernon for many years. So it will return to Mount Vernon for a couple of years. It'll be seen there by 1 million visitors a year, all of whom will see that it is on loan from Washington and Lee University. And we have borrowed their Gilbert Stuart portrait of Washington, painted in 1796, which was during the second term of his presidency of the United States. And in fact, it's the same year that he made his transformative gift to this place. So we now have both Lee and Washington up there as they were in their most important years of connection.
That would have to make the list of amazing facts about Washington and Lee that the sitting United States president made the gift to us.
Right, and he did it because he thought presciently that the future of the country lay to the west, and he thought that the key to the successful future of the country was great education on the frontier, and the frontier was the Blue Ridge Mountains.
Right here.
We are the 9th oldest college or university in the United States, but we are the oldest college or university west of the Blue Ridge Mountains, and that's why George Washington invested in us.
Do you or the board anticipate other changes arising from the commission report?
Do not. I do not think there will be any other changes announced. There's a lot of work to do, but I think the work that needs doing has already been announced.
You've been so generous with your time today. Thank you again. Take a minute and close for us. So what would you say to the extended Washington and Lee family as you turn the corner into 2019 and look ahead?
Well, I think the main thing I would say is I've been here 2 years, and it's an extraordinary place, and we have a very special community, and the university is exceptionally strong. The quality of the education is strong, our values are strong, our finances are in good shape, and that's all due to the support of so many people, our students and our faculty and the alumni and parents and friends of the place, and I'm really lucky to be here. So thank you.
Lucky to have
Thank
you.
you for hiring me.
Thank you,
All
Will.
right.